Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In the previous lecture, we had started with the topic of gas exchange in the lungs. In today's lecture, we are going to continue with the same topic and we are going to discuss two important topics in today's lecture. The first topic that we are going to discuss is diffusing capacity of the respiratory membrane. And the second topic that we are going to discuss is ventilation perfusion ratio. So first we are going to talk about the diffusing capacity and we are going to see what is it, what are the normal values of diffusing capacities of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how are the diffusing capacities of oxygen and carbon dioxide measured. So we will begin with the first definition of the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. We are going to see what it is and how it can be defined. So diffusing capacity is actually the volume of a gas that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute for a partial pressure difference of 1 millimeter of mercury. It's the volume of gas that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute for a partial pressure difference of 1 millimeter of mercury. This is the definition of the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. Remember, all the factors that affect the rate of diffusion of the gases across respiratory membrane can also affect the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. It is very simple to understand that if any factor increases the rate of diffusion of a gas, either oxygen or carbon dioxide, across the respiratory membrane, it means it is ultimately going to increase the total volume of the gas that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute. So all the factors that increase the rate of diffusion can also affect the diffusing capacity, can also increase the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. Now we are going to talk about the diffusing capacity of oxygen. Now diffusing capacity of oxygen is 21 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury. What does it mean? It means that 21 ml of oxygen will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute if the partial pressure difference of oxygen across the respiratory membrane is 1 millimeter of mercury. I am again repeating it, that by a value of 21 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury, which is the diffusing capacity of oxygen, we mean that 21 ml of oxygen is going to diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute if the partial pressure difference in millimeter of mercury across the respiratory membrane for oxygen is 1. Under resting conditions, when a person is breathing quietly, the mean pressure difference of oxygen across respiratory membrane is 11 millimeter of mercury. Here, let me clear that when we talk about the partial pressure difference of oxygen across the respiratory membrane, it is the mean pressure difference. It is not the difference of alveolar partial pressure of oxygen and the pulmonary capillary partial pressure of oxygen. So when we talk about the difference, it might instantly comes to your mind that the alveolar pressure is 104 millimeter of mercury for the oxygen and PO2 in the pulmonary capillaries is 40 millimeter of mercury. So pressure difference should be the difference of 104 and 40. But it is not so. It is not the simple difference. It is the mean pressure difference. So mean pressure difference, mean oxygen pressure difference across respiratory membrane is 11 millimeter of mercury. So if the pressure difference is 11 millimeter of mercury, the total volume of oxygen that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute will be equal to the product of 21 and 11. So when we multiply 21 with 11, so the total amount of oxygen that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane will be calculated. So the total amount of oxygen that diffuses across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute for partial pressure difference of 11 millimeter of mercury is 230 ml. It means in the resting condition, when a person is breathing quietly, 230 ml of oxygen will diffuse across the respiratory membrane. Now, exercise has an effect on the diffusing capacity. During exercise, the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane is increased not only for the oxygen but also for the carbon dioxide. During exercise, the diffusing capacity of oxygen, it is increased from a value of 21 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury to 65 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury. The increase in the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane during exercise is because of hyperventilation, which also causes the stretching of the alveolar walls, and the other factor that contributes to increased diffusing capacity is increase in the pulmonary blood flow. So it increases the surface area of the respiratory membrane. These two factors, that is the hyperventilation and the increased pulmonary blood flow, also brings about a more appropriate match between the ventilation and the perfusion of the lung. So it results in increased diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. So oxygen diffusing capacity will be increased from a value of 21 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury to 65 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury. Now, oxygen diffusing capacity can be measured by carbon monoxide method. I am not going into the detail of the method. It's very simple method. You can give a reading of this method. It is given in your textbook, that is Guyton. Now, I will talk about the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide. Now, diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide is the volume of carbon dioxide which will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute for partial pressure difference of 1 millimeter of mercury. Under resting conditions, the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide is 400 to 450 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury. Now, exercise causes an increase in the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide as well, for the same reason that we have just discussed with the diffusing capacity of the oxygen. So during exercise, the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide may be increased to 1200 to 300 ml per minute per millimeter of mercury. Now, diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide, it is measured indirectly from the diffusing capacity of oxygen. Now, why it is so? It is because of the fact that the mean pressure difference of carbon dioxide across the respiratory membrane is less than 1 because of its greater solubility in the body tissues. Its rate of diffusion is quite high. As we also discussed this point in the previous lecture, that the diffusion coefficient and the rate of diffusion of carbon dioxide as compared to oxygen is 20 times greater. So we have to measure the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide indirectly from the diffusing capacity of oxygen by comparing their diffusion coefficients. Since the diffusion coefficient of the carbon dioxide is 20 times greater than the diffusion coefficient of oxygen, so the diffusing capacity of carbon dioxide is also 20 times greater than that of oxygen. So that's how we calculate this value of 400 to 450 ml per minute, which is the volume of carbon dioxide that will diffuse across the respiratory membrane in 1 minute. And in exercise, this is increased to about 1200 to 1300 ml per minute. Now we will move on to the next topic, which is ventilation perfusion ratio. Now, ventilation perfusion ratio is defined as the ratio of alveolar ventilation to pulmonary blood flow. It is abbreviated as VA divided by Q, where VA stands for alveolar ventilation. We have already talked about it in our previous lectures. And Q stands for the pulmonary blood flow, which is equal to the cardiac output, blood flow per minute, which is equal to the cardiac output. Again, I am repeating that ventilation perfusion ratio is the ratio of alveolar ventilation to pulmonary blood flow, and it is abbreviated as VA divided by Q. Now, the normal value for VQ ratio is 0.8. This is the value for the whole lung. And how it is calculated? It is calculated by dividing the alveolar ventilation with pulmonary blood flow per minute. From our previous discussion, we know that alveolar ventilation per minute is 4200 ml per minute. And the pulmonary blood flow is equal to 5 liter per minute, which is the cardiac output. So when we divide 4200 ml with 5 liter or 5000 ml, we get a value of 0.8. So 4200 divided by 5000 gives us a normal ventilation perfusion ratio of 0.8, and remember that this value is for the entire lung. Now, all the parts of the lungs do not receive equal amount of air, that is the ventilation and the blood flow. So, there are variations in the VQ ratio in different parts of the lungs, especially if a person is standing. In a standing position, there can be variations in the VQ ratio in different parts of the lungs. We will talk about the lung apex and the base of the lung. When a man is standing, in the lung apex, the VQ ratio is high. It is greater than this normal value, which is for the entire lung. Again, I am repeating. In a standing person, at the apex of the lungs, the VQ ratio is high. Now, why it is so? Why VQ ratio is more in the upper part of the lung? It is because of the fact that in standing position, the amount of blood flow to the upper parts of the lung is less because of the effect of gravity as compared to the amount of ventilation in the upper part of the lung. Again, I am repeating that in a standing position, the amount of blood flow to the upper part of the lungs is less because of gravity as compared to the ventilation in the upper part of the lung. So when there is less blood flow as compared to ventilation, this will cause VQ ratio to become high. It may be 2 to 3 in the lung apex. Now we are going to talk about the base of the lungs. Now at the bases of the lungs, the blood flow is greater as compared to the alveolar ventilation. The blood flow is greater because of gravity as compared to the alveolar ventilation. It is in excess of alveolar ventilation. So when blood flow is more, ventilation is less, this will cause the VQ ratio to become low. So at the basis of the lungs, in standing position, VQ ratio is less, it is low. It may be as low as 0.6 instead of 0.8. During exercise, there is increase in the pulmonary blood flow and there is increase in the alveolar ventilation. Due to increased pulmonary blood flow and increased pressures during exercise, the inequalities of the blood flow in different parts of the lungs become less marked. So this results in improved VQ ratio. Similarly, if a person lies down, the blood flow to all parts of the lung will become equal. because in lying position there is no effect of gravity. Again, in this situation, the VQ ratio in all parts of the lung will become equal. I am repeating, if a person is lying down, the blood flow to all parts of the lungs become equal, and the differences in the VQ ratio in the lung apex and the base of the lungs is not present. So VQ ratio will be equal in all parts of the lungs in lying position, but there will be differences in the VQ ratio in the upper part of the lung and in the base of the lung in the standing position. Now, what is the significance of VQ ratio? Now, VQ ratio tells us the efficiency of the gas exchange in the lungs. It tells us about the efficacy of the gas exchange, that how adequate is the gas exchange process occurring in the lungs. And remember that for optimal gas exchange in the lungs, there should be proper match between ventilation and the blood flow. That is, each part of the lung should have an adequate blood flow and adequate ventilation for gas exchange to occur. So if both are not adequate or both are not matched or they both are not in proportion to each other, this will decrease the efficacy of gas exchange. Like it happens in certain diseases, that either there is a decrease in the ventilation in some diseases, and this will affect the VQ ratio and efficacy of gas exchange, and in some conditions there is decrease in the pulmonary blood flow. Again, this is going to cause an effect on the ventilation perfusion ratio, and it is also going to affect the efficacy of gas exchange. Now we are going to see these two situations where VQ ratio is either increased or it is decreased. So remember that for adequate gas exchange, the VQ ratio should be 0.8 normal. At 0.8 there is optimal gas exchange. If it is high or if it is low, in both of these situations the gas exchange is not optimal, it is affected, it is less than normal. Now there are two conditions. We are going to talk about two situations, that is increase in the VQ ratio and the decrease in the VQ ratio. So first we are going to talk when there is increase in VQ ratio. Now VQ ratio increase if there is decrease in the blood flow. A ventilation is in excess of the blood flow. Now how can the blood flow be decreased? The blood flow can be decreased if there is the pulmonary embolism or thrombosis, which causes obstruction of the blood flow to a part of lung, or there is pulmonary arteritis. Now when there is decreased blood flow to a part of the lung because of these conditions, the VQ ratio is going to increase because ventilation is more, ventilation is in excess to blood flow. Although we say that VQ ratio is increased, but this is not beneficial because ventilation is in excess, there is not adequate blood flow for the gases to be exchanged. So oxygen cannot diffuse into the blood because there is decreased blood flow, less oxygen will diffuse into the blood, and this will cause wasting of ventilation, and wasting of ventilation will produce physiological dead space. We have already discussed this point in our previous lectures. Now the other situation is when there is decrease in the VQ ratio. Now the second and the third conditions can result in decrease in ventilation perfusion ratio. So abdominal surgery, obesity, they can cause decrease in the VQ ratio, and the collapse of the lungs, diseases of the chest wall that interfere with the lung expansion and decrease the overall ventilation of the lungs, and airway obstruction like seen in asthma or chronic bronchitis. All these conditions can cause a decrease in the VQ ratio. Now the question is how these are going to cause a decrease in the VQ ratio. Now, because of obesity and abdominal surgery, there is interference with the normal descent of the diaphragm, and there is decrease in the alveolar ventilation. So when alveolar ventilation is decreased, the value of VQ ratio is going to decrease. And when there is collapse of the lungs or there is airway obstruction, the part of the lung beyond the obstruction will not be ventilated. Despite the fact that this part of the lung is having a normal blood flow, but this will not result in gaseous exchange because there is no new air brought into that part of the lung so that oxygen can diffuse into it or carbon dioxide can be removed from the blood into the air because there is no ventilation. So if there is loss of ventilation because of airway obstruction to a part of the lung, that can happen in asthma or chronic bronchitis or collapse of a part of the lung. This will result in low VQ ratio, and when VQ ratio is low or less than normal, this will result in formation of this will result in increased in physiological shunt, a concept that we studied in the beginning of the lectures. That physiological shunt or shunted blood is produced when it is not oxygenated, and you can very well understand now if there is no ventilation, how can the blood be oxygenated? So that blood flowing through the part of the lung which has obstruction of the airways, that blood is again wasted in the sense of oxygenation. So this blood will constitute the shunted blood or the physiological shunt. And the effect of physiological shunt is that it will cause a decreased oxygen in the blood. So either if the VQ ratio is increased or if it is decreased, as we have seen in these situations, this is not beneficial to us. It will result in decreased gas exchange. The efficacy of gas exchange will decrease across the respiratory membrane. This is the VQ diagram. It shows us the partial pressure of oxygen on the x-axis and partial pressure of carbon dioxide on the y-axis. These are the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the alveolar air. And it shows us that when the VQ ratio is normal, the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide will be 104 millimeter of mercury and 40 millimeter of mercury of PCO2. When VQ ratio becomes infinity, that is when there is total loss of blood flow to a part of lung, the pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide will be equilibrated with the atmospheric air, and PO2 in the alveolar air will become 149 millimeter of mercury, and of carbon dioxide it will be negligible, very small, or we can say 0. And the other extreme situation is then when VQ ratio becomes 0. It will become 0 when there is no ventilation. So in this situation, the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the alveolar air will become equal to the partial pressures of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the pulmonary capillary blood. So PO2 will be equal to 40 millimeter of mercury in the alveolar air, and the PCO2 in the alveolar air will be 45 millimeter of mercury. These values are in equilibrium with the partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the pulmonary capillary blood. Now we have discussed this point, so I am going to skip this slide. Now coming to the physiological shunt. Although we have already discussed it in the beginning, but I am going to quickly revise it here, repeat it here. Physiological shunt is the total quantitative amount of shunted blood per minute. Shunted blood means the amount of blood, which is volume of the blood, which is not deoxygenated while passing through the lungs. So this is the shunted blood. The cause of physiological shunt, it can be present normally, like we did in the beginning, that 2% of the cardiac output that flows into the lungs through bronchial circulation, it is not oxygenated while passing through the lungs. So that is the normal physiological shunt. It is present normally as well. And it is increased in abnormal situations that we have just discussed, that if there is decreased alveolar ventilation because of airway obstruction, like in asthma or emphysema, then there is increased in the amount of physiological shunt, because more blood will not be oxygenated while passing through the lungs. And the effect of increased physiological shunt is that it causes a decrease in partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood, and it may increase the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arterial blood as well. So that's all for today. I'm going to stop here. I hope you will understand the lecture. Thank you for listening.